Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, this is Dr. Howie Jacobson of AskHowie.com with...
The very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with DefeatYourCravings.com.
And neither of us are...
medical doctors.
Technically, neither of us is a medical doctor, right?
Neither of us be. Neither of us be medical doctors, but we're the PhD types.
Yeah, and we can geek out on grammar.
I'm a geek trapped in a jock's body. What's up, man?
I just got the results of a 360-degree survey put up by Leadership Circle. So what I did was I took a survey and they asked me all sorts of tough questions about myself. And I sent it to a bunch of other people, including you. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And so I got the debrief today. I got the results. And there's 3 mega bits of information. One is how I saw myself. And it's, numerically and then normalized against the distribution of the hundreds of thousands of other people who've also taken this instrument. There is what other people thought of me, that quantified against the same scale. And then there's the delta, the gap between what I thought and what other people thought.
Interesting.
There's a whole bunch of really juicy bits in there that I just got this like an hour and a half ago, so I've only begun diving into it. But the thing that really struck me was one of the biggest gaps between how I saw myself and other people saw me was that they felt that I was very much more self-aware than I thought I was. And I thought, doesn't that make me not self-aware? And if it makes me not self-aware, then I'm self-aware. So I wanted to check in with you, oh great wise font of psychological wisdom. Can we talk about self-awareness?
I mean, obviously, how I was one of the people who probably rated you as more self-aware than you thought that you were. I have the impression that you carry a harsh superego and you think less of yourself in a lot of areas that other people would not think about you. Like I've seen you carry guilt for making money. I've had a sense that you were raised in a similar tradition that I was, a very Jewish tradition where there was a lot of neurotic guilt. I don't know exactly where it comes from with you because we never really talked about that. I don't think it makes you less self-aware. I think it makes you less willing to acknowledge your strengths or feeling like you need to be more humble about them than you really do. I don't know if you were made to feel that was prideful or I don't know what it is, but I've just always had the impression that you have a lot more competence than you give yourself credit for.
Well, yeah, that's certainly the message that came from the instrument, which is interesting and lovely in many ways. I remember reading about a study, and I think I might have read this in Danny Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which is all about sort of cognitive errors and heuristics. The study was a survey of, I think, psychologists, basically, or mental health professionals or behavioral professionals. One of the questions was, compared to other people, how self-aware are you? And something like 95% of the respondents rated themselves in the top 10% of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just thinking about that, whether I'm grading on a different scale than other people, that might be far more harsh than useful. What is self-awareness from your perspective, and how can it help us or get in our way in our lives?
I think it begins with an understanding that there's always more to learn and that you can't lift yourself up by your own shirt collar and that other people will always be able to point out things that you wouldn't have known about yourself. And I think that by embracing that ethos and seeking out other people to prevent you from becoming too myopic and show you things you're not aware of, I think that's the beginning of self-awareness. I also think that there needs to be an understanding that the brain wants to automate behaviors and thoughts. It takes energy to think and reflect. We evolved in an environment where there wasn't as much time for that as we have now. And a lot of the time we have even less time for that now sometimes with our busy lives. It's only natural to allow those automatic behavior loops to take place. I experience it where people aren't really present while they're eating. Before they know it, there's a bag of donuts in their stomach and crumbs on the car seat, and they don't quite remember how it got there. And so self-awareness begins with mindfulness. It begins with a willingness to pause before you act and see what you might be thinking and feeling. Even if you don't know what you might be thinking about and feeling, it really requires that space between stimulus and response to get there. Once you recognize that we live life, like the early psychoanalysts would say, we lived it like a riderless horse. Once you realize that and you start to pause, it involves the courage to look at what's actually there. And often what's actually there are some nasty impulses. There's anger and lust and greed and all the things we would think of in the 7 deadly sins or something like that. We need to be willing to see those, knowing that we have the capacity not to act on it, in order to figure out what do we really want to do with that energy. Along the way, we can figure out where it came from. I know for a long time I had an impulse to self-destruct in business. It took a lot of pausing. I do this in the form of dream analysis. I think that's the ultimate pausing, to take the time to write down your dreams and associate to them and figure out what patterns and impulses they represent. But it took me a lot of that and a lot of talking to therapists and really self-reflecting to figure out where that came from. In my case, there are some screen memories. From the time I was 6, my dad he would just whoop my ass at everything and he'd feel proud of it.
Huh.
So we'd play Monopoly and he'd talk me as a 6-year-old into these really bad deals. Is it any surprise that I struggle in business and I wound up taking the short end of the stick a lot of the time? That insight is an element of self-awareness, but by itself, it didn't really fix the problem. It's kind of like seeing an x-ray of your broken bone and knowing where it's broken and why it's broken, but you still have to set it and fix it. And then it took a lot of years to figure out practically, behaviorally, how do I reassure myself that my dad's not going to be furious if I succeed, or it doesn't matter if he's furious if I succeed, and what concrete practical actions do I have to take to accept that I am allowed to be successful? I'm allowed to do it. It's kind of a lifelong journey. I think I'm there or almost there.
Yeah.
But so I think self-awareness, it begins with the separation and having an observing ego. It involves with thinking rather than just doing. And I always say that thinking is planning for doing and dreaming is planning for thinking. That's why I always back up to dreams to figure out what's really going on. It begins with that interest and willingness to separate from your impulses and then to examine. And ultimately, I think there's a danger of pursuing self-awareness for self-awareness' sake. Ultimately, it's, well, how is this going to make your life better? And that's where you get to the practical elements of what you need to say and do to live differently than you did before. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's how I understand it.
Yeah, you are. And you're helping me with some key distinctions, I think, that are clarifying things for me. Just you said like the goal of life isn't self-awareness. It's a tool that you deploy at certain times. So I'm thinking like when I'm playing sports and I'm really doing well and I'm in it, like I'm the opposite of self-aware. Feels like there's not even a me there. It's just doingness and beingness. And so self-awareness, as you describe it, is not just the insight of the x-ray of the broken bone, but the pausing before acting and noticing what's in the stew pot of your mind that's moving you in one direction or another so that you have the freedom to choose.
Choices. Yeah. The benefit of self-awareness is the freedom to choose rather than just repeat the patterns of your past.
Right. Okay. So the important, I think, takeaway for me from this 360 is there's gaps. Some of them, like maybe this particular gap about self-awareness isn't relevant or useful at all. But there was another big gap around my achievement. I seem to put pleasing other people ahead of achieving things for myself.
Yes, you do.
So there's a place where self-awareness, I could burn some brain self-awareness calories in a way that's going to probably give me a very high return on investment.
Hmm. I once had a dream. It was right after I purchased my condo. And this is the first real estate I've ever owned by myself. I was married from 22 to 50, actually 52. I would say it's 28 years, but I guess it was more than that. In 2019, I decided I'm going to buy real estate for myself. So I bought this condo on the beach and I just loved it. I'm still there. I love it now too. I was dating a woman at the time who really wasn't right for me. We were only dating for a couple of weeks. She was very nice. She was very kind, but she was drinking way too much and she was smoking, and for my taste. I had this dream that I was peeing in the condo, but there wasn't a bathroom. So I was just making a mess of this thing that I just bought, which was the first thing that I'd done for myself since I got divorced. It really made me happy. When I was looking at it and analyzing it, and I actually talked to a friend about it, and she said, Glenn, you're peeing on your happiness. You're trying to tell yourself, don't pee on your happiness. You're allowed to be successful. And to this day, I actually made an affirmation that says, don't pee on your happiness, Glenn. Stop people pleasing and pursue what you want. But I still care very much about other people, and I think I make decisions that balance things. But I've used that awareness, that self-awareness, that I will tend to pee on my happiness. I've used that self-awareness to get myself to make better decisions and, be willing to put myself first sometimes.
Nice. Yeah. So you're doing emotional Kegel exercises.
Dude, that's funny. I'm gonna add that to the affirmation now. Do your emotional Kegel exercises. You're such a weirdo.
Thank you.
Yeah, I put that in your assessment.
Good. That was the one area where everyone was in agreement. I'm a weirdo. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.